Okay, look, guys, I had just got through doing a live and I was about to head out because I got to do some stuff with the wife. And I got some breaking news from MSNBC, and I don't like the title of this, and I got it off YouTube, so we're gonna watch it together, and we'll go from there. So let's go ahead and get into it. I wonder what they're talking about.
All right, let's get to that breaking news, everybody. We have got this. It's from the Supreme Court, where special counsel Jack Smith's request to immediately settle Donald Trump's immunity claim in the election interference probe, it has been denied.
How about that? How about that? So let me tell you what's going on. If you don't know what's going on, Donald Trump keep claiming that he got presidential immunity, even though he was president at the time, but he had lost the election and he was running. He was a candidate for the next term. So he keep arguing presidential immunity in the case in Florida, in the case in D.C., and a lot of other things. Excuse me, presidential immunity. Well, Jack Smith got tired of it, and he said, okay, we're going to fast track this up to the Supreme Court. So, because Donald Trump, and I just talked about this in my live, Donald Trump likes to slow roll things. The case down in Florida, he's slow rolling that, and the judge is helping him because he appointed her, Eileen Cannon. So now he's trying to fast track this up to the Supreme Court. And Donald Trump ultimately wants to get to the Supreme Court. So every time he loses a case, I'm going to argue it at this appeal court. I'm going to appeal. I'm going to appeal. I'm going to appeal. Delaying the outcomes to where he want to say, okay, if I can make it to the election and if I win, I can get all this stuff wiped away. Then you think the Supreme Court is going to say, hey, let's adjudicate this now so we can get this over with. Donald Trump said, no, don't go to the Supreme Court. But that's where he wants to go. So he's been trying to slow this down forever. Supreme Court is helping him.
Essentially shuttling that which Jack Smith wanted, the fast track, if you will, to decide presidential immunity. Donald Trump, of course, has asked the Supreme Court to take this case up as well. So there's a lot to get to right now because...
So the D.C. Court of Appeals, that's the next step before it gets to the Supreme Court. The D.C. Court of Appeals told Jack Smith, hey, we can decide this case. But they know that if you go to the D.C. Court of Appeals, the next step is the Supreme Court. Jack Smith said, no, we're going to, because we already know if we go to you and you go, let's say he wins, Trump is going to appeal to the Supreme Court. Let's say he loses. Let's say Jack Smith loses. He's going to appeal to the Supreme Court. So it's ultimately going to go to the Supreme Court. So why all of a sudden the Supreme Court don't want to try this? Why don't they want to pick this up? Because I've been seeing on reports, and I know American history a little bit, they stepped in with Nixon in 1972 when they said, hey, release those tapes that you had in the White House. He released the tapes. He had to resign. They came back and said in 2000, hey, stop the recount. George W. Bush is the president. So they stepped in and solved those cases right away. Why all of a sudden, now that it's 6 Republicans and 3 Democrats on the Supreme Court, that they saying, no, we're not going to take this case up. Send it to the D.C. Court of Appeals. When they both know, everybody knows it's going to ultimately go to the Supreme Court. They're trying to delay this.
Of this could greatly sideline upcoming cases and potentially affect the 2024 election. Joining us now, we have NBC Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Dilanian, and back with us, former U.S. Attorney and MSNBC legal analyst Barbara McQuaid. Okay,
Barbara is real smart. Barbara is real smart.
Interpretation of this, how much does this set back Jack Smith?
Yeah, this is definitely a setback for Jack Smith, who had hoped to leapfrog the Court of Appeals and go straight to the Supreme Court. Instead, he will have to first litigate this matter in the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. Now, in the meantime, since he filed this request with the Supreme Court, the D.C. Circuit has said they would hear the question on an expedited basis. They have set oral argument in the case for January 9th.
So that's fine. The D.C. Court of Appeals said, hey, we'll look at this January 9th. Right? So it is kind of getting fast-tracked. So the D.C. Court of Appeals, I'm looking at the wrong screen. The D.C. Court of Appeals is doing what the Supreme Court should be doing, fast-tracking this.
If they decide fairly quickly, then we could be back at the Supreme Court maybe within a month or so, if the court acts quickly. or it could be that they take their time and we don't decide the case until June, in which case the trial will be delayed by that amount. So
what she just said was, if the D.C. Court of Appeals, if he go to trial in January and they argue this case, the D.C. Court of Appeals may not come up with a decision until about March, like February, March. And depending on who wins or who loses, that side is going to appeal to the Supreme Court. And they may not take it up to like June or July. Delaying the decision. Let's keep going, man.
I think the March 4th trial date, either way you slice it, is in some trouble now. That doesn't mean it can't be tried before the election, but I think we're looking more at a summer trial instead of a spring trial.
Right.
Which potentially affects the election, Barbara.
Right.
I mean, how long would a trial like this take?
I have assumed it would take about 2 months. There are 5 different
That's what I said.
Each of which would probably take the government a week to try, give the defense a couple of weeks for their case, and then maybe a week for closing arguments and deliberations. So,
and that all depends. I hate when I pause people crazy.
At the closest.
So that all depends on the judge or judges. If they say, you know what, like Tanya Chutkin in D.C., she's not playing around. You're going to do A, B, and C. She's not playing around with them. But if you got a judge like Eileen Cannon who slow rolls the process, it could take weeks, if not months, to get the case settled. Because a judge is like a referee. They set the rules. It's like playing Monopoly and playing spades. You set the rules before you play. A judge is like the rules committee. They set the rules and they go through all the appeals processes before you actually argue your case. And if you got a judge like Eileen Cannon that slow rolls the process, this could take 2-3 months. And that's just at the D.C. Court of Appeals. What happens when you got 6 Republican appointed justices in the Supreme Court, 3 of which was put there by Donald Trump? What you think they're going to do? They're already delaying it right now.
8 weeks, but you're right. I mean, the primaries will have been settled likely by June. The conventions will be beginning in August. And so this would have to occur kind of simultaneously with a...
And they will say, I am a presidential candidate. You cannot try me for any crimes because that's election interference because I'm actually the nominee for president. I haven't won yet, but I'm a large political party presidential candidate. Why would you put me on trial now? Wait till after the election. And you may get some Republican appointed justices that's going to say, let's wait till after the election. This is crazy.
Okay, Ken, presidential immunity was again being bantered about on 2 tracks legally, right? And so with regard to the U.S. District Court of Appeals, January 9th being when that particular case goes and gets decided, or at least begins, with the oral arguments. Give me a sense of how this potentially affects that, if at all. Is that completely separate, or could there be influence in some way here?
Well, there's 2 arguments about immunity going on. One's in civil cases where Donald Trump is being sued, for example, by Capitol police officers over January 6th. The appeals court, the D.C. Circuit, has already ruled that he is not subject to presidential immunity because he was not acting as the president.
Right.
And that was an important ruling because it interpreted the same conduct that the Court of Appeals is now going to have to interpret in the criminal context.
So let me just give you guys, because I can't. Let me give you guys a rundown of why Donald Trump is going through this stuff, and I'll leave it at that. I'll leave it at that. So let's look at, and I did a video on this a couple of years ago. One of the reasons why Donald Trump is going through what he's going through is because he didn't have a president to back him up. And let me explain. Go back to Richard Nixon in 1972, 1974, when he was getting in trouble for the Nixon Watergate and the Nixon tapes and all that other stuff, right? His political party went to him and said, hey, not only do we have the votes in the House of Representatives to impeach you, but we also got the votes in the Senate to remove you. What does that mean? I'm getting crazy here. What does that mean? That does not mean he's criminally liable for anything. All that means is inside politics, inside the White House, inside the Constitution, the only recourse that the government has against the president is to impeach you and try you and remove you. That's it. Once you are removed, you are still subject to laws of criminal penalties once you are removed from office. Keep that in mind. Richard Nixon committed crimes in the White House, right? He was going to be impeached. He was going to be removed. Then he had to face justice. What happened? He resigned. That didn't save him. What saved him was a pardon by his successor. His successor came in, I think it was Ford. Ford came in and said, we need to get rid of this political nightmare or whatever, and he gave him a full pardon. That saved Nixon. And he was guilty because in order to accept a federal pardon, you have to sign saying that you were guilty of crimes. So Nixon got a pardon. That's why he was never tried. Let's fast forward. Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton got in trouble for Monica Lewinsky, not for what he did with Monica Lewinsky. He got in trouble for lying to federal prosecutors about what he did with Monica Lewinsky. When he did that, he lied under oath. That's a penalty of perjury. That's a federal offense. You can get in trouble for that. He got impeached in the House. He did not get removed in the Senate. He got it by one vote, but he was a lame duck president for the last year or so of his office. Okay? Fast forward to the election. His hope was that Al Gore was going to win the 2000 election, but Al Gore lost. George W. Bush was not going to pardon Clinton. So what did Clinton do? Clinton had to go to his own Department of Justice and talk to his own Attorney General and negotiate a settlement. And what did he settle on? He said, okay, I will pay a fine. I'll suspend my law license for 5 years and I'll do whatever I got to do. So he did that. That was his contrition. That was his negotiation with the prosecutors. I did a crime. I committed to a crime, but I settled out of court. Donald Trump did not have anybody to settle out of court with his crimes. So he is still subject, even though he could have been impeached. He was not removed. He was impeached twice. Even though he was subject to trial, which is what he's going through right now, he has not had a president to come along and pardon him. So his only recourse is to get back into the White House and get all this stuff shut down. What better way to get into the White House is to delay the prosecution, which is what he's been doing. And now you got 6 Supreme Court justices that said to you, hey, we're going to wait and let the D.C. Court of Appeals handle this. We're not going to get involved, even though they know they're going to get involved. And what's going to happen when in June, July, August, when everybody's gearing up for the presidential campaign and you have Joe Biden and Donald Trump vying for the White House, you got them on the court side and you got Donald Trump on the defense side saying, hey, I'm a presidential candidate. You cannot try me right now. Let the people decide. Do this after the election. And what happens when he get it after the election? No, I'm sorry. What happens when he get the presidency? This is crazy. I can't believe it. I know a lot of pundits are going to talk about this for the next day or two. If anything new come out, I will let you guys know. But I got to ask you, what do you think about this?